Hi, I'm James Lim, founder of Property Plus System, and actually today I'll just give you a slight market update on what happened in Q2 of 2025, the private and the HDB market. So let's get on with it. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel on YouTube and click on the alert notification. Now, first of all, I'm just going to talk about the HDB. And recently, we know that 2 weeks ago, the government actually came out with a new cooling measure that increased the seller stamp duty from 3 years to 4 years. But does the data that the government has warrant such an increase? And is there a correlationship? Now, when we were to look at the private condo price index at time, right? Okay, you'll see that from Q1 to Q2, there is a price increase. But you can see that the price increase is only about 1.1% increase and not a very huge significant increase. But however, when you look at the transaction volume, okay, you'll see that the transaction volume falls by around a third or even more than that, from 7,000 over transactions to 4,000, which means less people are still buying private condos. Now, this is actually in a way a good thing, okay? And why? Because the prices is, to explain to you, is actually very well controlled if you are entering into the private condo market. Okay. Now, when we look into the summary at that time on the individual data at that time, you'll see that for landed properties, the price has increased by 0.7%. Cost Central is the one that increased the most. Now, the reason why this increased the most because, last time I did mention in my previous slides that for the rest of Central region, or what we call City Fringe, and the CCR, actually the price delta difference is actually very narrow, okay? So a lot of people, when they look at the City Fringe at time, they say, hey, why not I just pay a little bit more for me to buy at a better location for roughly around the same price. And of course, that's the reason why that the Cost Central region price has increased. Now, the second reason is that this is actually by what I call the foreigners playground, okay, where foreigners like Indonesians will actually buy into the Cost Central region like Orchard Road property. And because they buy into this area, and due to the cooling measure that foreigners were to buy into Singapore property 60% ABSD, foreigners are no longer buying there. That's why the price has not been growing for the last 10 over years. And right now, because of the gap, when the RCR and the OCR start to price increase at time and to catch up with the price of CCR, therefore, right now CCR seems to be very good value. That's why a lot of people buy into it. Now, even if you were to look at the next few current launches that's up and coming, like River Green and Promenade Peak, where the price there is like transacting at 2,600 to 2,800 per square foot, it is a very value buy. That's why I just want to inform you beforehand that definitely a lot of people will start to grab all these units, especially in District 9, River Valley area. Okay. Now, new home sales, this is actually what we call the building under construction or by developers. Okay. The number of units has actually dropped by 66%. Now, this is nothing surprising because the main reason is that there's not a lot of new launches in the second quarter. But however, in the second half of Q3 of 2025, the time you'll see that, there's a lot of new launches up and coming. And then you'll see that this number will start to spike up again. So there's nothing fancy about that, okay? But more important is that the resale volume has actually decreased, okay? So less people are actually buying private home or private properties, okay? Now, if you look at this at time, volume has actually down, price never really go up by a lot. Does this warrant the seller stamp duty or not? No, okay? There's no correlationship at all. However, there's another set of data in which that the government sees that there's a lot of transaction, especially in the sub-sale market or projects sold before the project has TOP, which means the government knows that this group of investors, right, they are actually buying property and flipping. So that's what the government is trying to control, okay? They do not want flippers to enter the market or have a longer loan limit for the flippers, okay? Now, so because of all these prices are very controlled at time, I do not see any surprise or any cooling measures entering the market for the for this half of the year, okay, the second half of this year. So I feel that you want to enter the market now or enter the market later, there's no difference for the private market. So let's talk a little bit about the HDB market. Now, for the HDB market, compared with last quarter, you'll see that the number of transaction volume has actually increased, okay? Well, it has a very good drop from last quarter, 2024, but then again, you see that there's the number of transactions still increasing, and the price is still increased, but the price also increased very marginally of only 1% only, only one point of the price index, okay? Let's look at other data points. So important thing is this slide. Okay, for the whole of my video, this is the most important slide where I actually did talk about this news article 1 year ago. Okay, so just to let you know that when we look at the number of MOP units or new HDB entering into the market for resale, okay, this year there's less than 7,000 units, which is the lowest. Now, because this is the supply of new properties that enter into the market or new HDB entering the market, there's not going to be a lot of new supply, which means people will actually have to buy older, or they have to look at the BTO market, or they will fight for these 7,000 units, which means I am still very certain, okay, these 7,000 units, right, will actually cause the HDB market price to still continue to go up. Now, if you wait 2 more years until 2027, that time, where 18,000 or close to 19,000 new HDB entering into the resale market, that is where supply will catch up with demand, okay? And that is where I know that the price will drop. So, just to let you know, if you want to sell your HDB now to get a profit, yes, it's good. If you are currently staying in a very mature estate where your HDB is like $1 million and above, and you are thinking of whether to sell and upgrade now, yes, there is a value, because due to the limited supply, you can get a very good value of your HDB, okay? And yet, private property prices are very well controlled, which means to me, this year is the best year to upgrade from a HDB to a private condo. However, if you want to look at 2027 onwards, where there's a lot of supply entering the market at the time, that's where it's going to be a bit scary. You have a lot more competition. Prices may actually drop, okay? And if the price drop, you are actually not maximizing your value, okay? And we will not know what is going to happen to the private market at that point of time. Now, let's look at the total number of $1 million HDB transaction, okay? More importantly, I'm looking at which sector will actually has the most growth. So you will see that for the 4-room is the one that actually is growing the most, while 5-room is actually quite marginally, and executive also there's an increase. Which one is telling me is that people are actually looking or willing to pay for either big units, okay, executive, okay, or they are actually looking at the four rooms over here, okay? So because there's a more demand for 4-room, which means people are willing to pay 4-room for more better matured location like Bishan, Toa Payoh, Bidadari, Clementi, Queenstown area, okay? On the other hand, there's also a very huge demand for people wanting very big units, maybe in the outskirt area like Tampines area, because Tampines was the first, from last year, was the first estate that actually crosses the $1 million mark already, okay? So people are actually looking at this type of location, okay? Now, if you look at the HDB transaction by price range at time, well, what is the good news? The good news is that if you were to look at the gray area, you will see that the number of units that is 750,000 and below is only roughly around 74% or 73%. Now, this is indication for the government, okay? Anything above 1 million is what the government feels that is an outlier, where HDB shouldn't be like that. So, well, the price is still increased. The number of units is still increasing from my previous slide. But then again, if you look overall in the HDB market, okay, 73% is still below 750,000. Is affordable for the majority of Singaporeans. That is why the government is not, I would say, is not looking at controlling the HDB pricing. Okay. However, the government want to control what? The number of $1 million pricing. Okay, and in order to do that, that is why the government come up with the prime and the plus system, okay, to control or to cool down the overall market for these $1 million estates, okay. So overall, HDB is still very, very affordable, okay. It's just that looking at the total units entering the market in the next 2 years, supply will catch up with demand, prices may drop. So as a summary, I just want to let you know that the price is still increasing by 1% by the 21st quarter. And I can tell you that price will still continue to increase until the supply has catch up with demand. Okay. Yes, government are doing their job. Government is ramping up the number of BTO units. Okay. And we are not seeing right now because, you know, of this 5 years MOP period. And eventually, I know that the price for HDB will drop. So if you want to buy into the resale HDB market, do take note. Be prepared that your price may drop 2-3 years later. Okay. To buy, if you can wait for 3 to 4 years, even better. I know that the price will drop. Okay. Then again, if you have no choice, you need a place to stay, by all means, either buy a BTO, if not, just get a good value of your HDB. Okay. So the number of $1 million has actually sold at a record high. And this is where the government is going to curb it. So this is actually my worry. So if you were to say buy a $1 million HDB, I will just give you a bit of warning. Just be very careful of know what you are doing. Just know that if your price drop that time, do prepare for your price to drop. Okay. So some 3% is still priced below 750,000, which is actually very good news that the price for HDB is very well controlled. Okay. Close to 800,000 is hitting MOP, which is actually the lowest, as I mentioned. The supply is still very low this year. And importantly, the overall resale volume actually dropped by 5%, which means the demand is actually decreasing. Good news for everybody. Okay, when the demand decrease at time, we will expect price to drop. And why the resale volume also dropped is also because the government actually building more BTO. There's more sales and balance units. That's why overall prices are very controlled for HDB. Okay, so just to let you know that if you were to ask me for my expertise to look at these two data, private and HDB, I'll say that if HDB right now is at an all-time, or rather is still growing, and you can still sell for a very good profit, and private property prices are actually increasing as not as much as HDB, I feel that this year is a very good time to upgrade. If you are to wait for 1-2 more years later, your HDB price profit may not be as much growth as compared to this year. So that is something to take note of, and we will not know what's going to happen to the private market for the next 2 years. So if you want to upgrade, just do it this year. I think this is my most important sentence. Okay. Of course, definitely you want to upgrade, you need to see that there's something good out in the market for you to buy or to upgrade. Okay. Yes, I do see some areas that is actually pretty good, especially looking at this year new URA master plan.